I was already well into all of that in '59 when they started. And so I started sending them articles that things like, well, you need to look at this symbol and this word and this term here. And also you might want to look at this guy and this organization. So I was sending them little tidbits of information back in 1960 on the subject of Illuminati, on secret societies, not Illuminati. Because Illuminati I found out about, like I said, in 1967. When Anthony Hilder produced the series of records of 333 1/3 record albums called Illuminati. The man speaking was an incredibly interesting man named Myron Fagan. And I don't know if you've ever heard Myron Fagan's Illuminati records. It will knock you out. Absolutely. Today, it's still a knockout.
Wow.
And when I hear it today, I heard it 40 years ago. When I hear it today, it's still a mind blower.
I have a question for you that is a little bit moving onto another topic. It has to do with the Illuminati, but I wonder if you would address it. What is the significance of merging the red and the black?
Oh, that's interesting. It's called red and black and white, all three, red, black, and white, are referred to in Hollywood as death head colors, because death head comes from a Nazi organization called the SS and the Gestapo. Gestapo was referred to as the Order of the Death Head. And the Order of the Death Head, Gestapo in Nazi Germany, symbol was the skull and crossbones, skull and bones. That was their symbol. But to the Germans on the inside, the Gestapo was called the Order of Death Head. And Death Head's colors in Hollywood. I attended a lecture many years ago by a black doctor who worked at Martin Luther King Hospital. And some of my friends in the motion picture industry, black entertainers, called me and said, you really need to be here tonight. You need to come and hear this. It's going to be a private lecture by a doctor from Chicago who came out here, was an actual doctor working at Martin Luther King Hospital, and he was giving a lecture on death head colors. And in it, it was fascinating. It was a slide presentation at a library, in Santa Monica Library, in a private invitation only. There's only about 25 to 30 people there. And he was explaining the death head colors, why it's black, white, and red, and how black, white, and red are used in motion pictures. When someone is going to die or someone's going to be killed, those are the three prominent colors that will always be in those scenes. They're called death head colors. They symbolize the darkness of the darkest, the most profound presence of evil. Red, white, and black.
But there's also a significance in terms of the occult with regard to certain genetics.
Certain genetics?
Genetics.
Oh, of course, of course.
In other words, the red being a red-headed person with certain kinds of DNA.
Oh, I'm sure there is more to that.
And the black being a blonde, usually Celtics, a mixture perhaps.
I'm sure that there is that too, yeah. The only thing I was saying is that was very interesting, because I remember that night he talked about the European Masonic orders and how the Mexican gangs in Los Angeles and around the country use Masonic symbols from a particular Masonic order in Europe, while the black gangs use an opposing symbols in terms and symbols of a different Masonic order in Europe. And that most likely the gang members themselves do not realize that these are actually can be traced back to Masonic symbols in Europe. And so I believe that the gangs going on in America today are being organized, directed, and financed out of Europe to destroy our culture in America. I think that European Freemasonry is heavily involved in destroying America. And you need to understand the whole story about how America was founded and how it was founded as a corporation. It's a privately owned corporation. We can talk about that for days on end. And this is just my opinion, one man's opinion. But I'm going to give you my opinion as to the bottom line on the world today and the stuff that's going on the earth today. What we call Illuminati was originally a term which is given to us in Spain to a religious order in Spain that later on were amalgamated into what we call Jesuits. So the Jesuits are truly Illuminati themselves.
And the Vatican, and you go
well, that
into
was what I was going to say, yes. I believe that one of the most evil organizations that exist on the earth today, and you'd have to have spent all the years with me in libraries and research societies and traveling around the world and talking to other writers, authors, lecturers, and teachers, and collecting this stuff over a period of 45 to 48 years to understand what I'm telling you. But I believe today the most serious evil organization on the face of the earth is the Vatican. That's my personal opinion. I think if the Vatican was done away with off the face of the earth, there would be a shout of liberation heard around the world. Because the Vatican, in my opinion, is the bulwark of this dark thing that's happening on the earth. So when you talk about Illuminati, when you talk about the really dark criminal stuff that's going on in the earth, you're talking the Vatican. You're talking the Knights of Malta, which gave us the 6 men who founded the CIA in America, were all Catholics, members of the Knights of Malta. When you begin to look at the banking fraternities in America, like the Bank of America, Union Bank in California, all of these people who founded these banks and today are running the banking establishment are all Knights of Malta, Catholic Masonry. So when I hear people talking about the Jews this, the Jews that, and the Jews are responsible, I said, no, you better go back and do your homework. The Jews have been slaughtered all over Europe by the Vatican. You need to remember that for at least 2,300 years, Rome has dominated Europe. Under the Caesars of Rome, and in the 4th century, late 4th century, the Vatican comes into being, and the Vatican dominates all of Europe. All the heads of state, all the princes and kings and rulers, all the kings and rulers in Europe rule by the divine right. It's called the divine right of kings. What are you talking about? Who represents divine to give the king the right? The Pope. The Pope appoints certain families to be over the French. The Pope appoints certain people to be over the Germans and over the British. And so by divine right. Why? Because the Pope represents God. And the Pope says that this family is holy and that they should rule. And therefore they can now say they rule by divine right. And the whole idea of divine goes back to the chalice, and the Holy Grail. And in the Catholic Mass, you have the priest breaking the bread and then pouring the wine. Well, wine is made from grapes, and wine is red. So it's a red grape wine represents the blood of the atonement blood. It's a blood sacrifice. But where does where does the wine come from? It comes from grapes, and grapes grow on divine. And that's where we get the concept of the word divine, because grapes come from divine. So that's where we get the word divine. And once you begin to realize how the Vatican has, for over 2,300 years, Rome has dominated Europe, and in 1,600 years, the Vatican has dominated Europe. And Europe for 2,300 years has dominated the earth. So if you want to talk about conspiracies and you want to talk about evil, don't talk about Jews. You better talk about the people who would control Europe for over 2,300 years. Caesar of Rome, the Roman Catholic establishment. There's the